podcastjuice.net.
The planet is restless, Captain. They want their podcast, and they shall have it. I'll beam down to the surface. You have the bridge. Captain, that is illogical. These are Trek fans. They will challenge and dissect your knowledge with great emotion. It is a mission fraught with danger, peril, and grave risk. Suggestions? Send in the red shirts.
Ladies and gentlemen, you know what time it is. It's the red shirts, and we got a hot one today. Why is this a hot show today? I'll tell you why, because we have a special guest, the specialist of special guests. But before we get
She's a specialist.
She's a specialist, all right. But before we get to that, you can hear her laughing in the background. Let me introduce my stalwart crew. First, we have Mr. Craig J. Mr. J, how are you today?
I'm great. I'm just worried about the USS Internet because it's a bit shaky today.
Why? Well, you're in engineering today. I put you in engineering. You have to tell me why it's shaky.
It's because the captain doesn't know what he's doing.
What captain does? What captain does? All right. Now, last week we went on a mission to rescue our second crew member who was absent because he had been taken captive by the Kardashians, but we successfully extracted him from that mission. Now, Big Sexy, I just have to ask you, how many lights were there?
They're all 4 lights!
My man. And you did you eat that live egg? You did eat that live egg, right?
Hey, man, I was starving.
Okay, good. Now, they showed us footage of you hanging there naked. I kind of didn't want to see that. But I'm sorry. The shows went off the rails.
Totally off the rails already.
This is my interpretation of who was the captain in Doomsday Machine that went crazy? What was his name?
Decker.
Matt Decker.
Matt Decker, right.
Oh my gosh. Matt
Right.
Decker was awesome.
Oh, well, we're not going to get into that. That's a little conspiracy theory we have that Matt Decker is actually the father of the Decker from the motion picture. I think that's what Craig.
Of course he is.
Of course he is. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, see,
That's interesting.
All right, Big Sexy. I will let you sit in the captain's chair for punishment for my disrespecting my first officer. How's that?
You will let me sit in the chair? Haha, cute.
All right, are you on your Michael Burnham? You gonna try to mutiny to get in the chair? Anyway, Big Sexy, how are you today?
I'm all right. Went to a wedding yesterday and cleared off my calendar, my desk to get deeper into this record label I'm putting together.
Wow.
And the more I learn, the more fun it is.
You got a record label you putting together?
My client, Josh, is putting together a label, which means I'm putting together the label. And I've been doing tons of research on it, and I know now why Death Row failed. I can tell you exactly why that happened, and I know about a lot of these imprints that are under the bigger distribution networks. Yes.
If you're putting together a record label, I'm gonna quote Fred Sanford. If I didn't care for you, do I have a shot? Do I have a shot, Simon Cowell?
Not remotely.
Wow. Okay.
What did my man say? What did Randy say? Yo, dog. That's not good, dog.
Okay, man. Fine. All right, so let's get to the spotlight, the center of the attraction of why you're listening to this show today. And that would be, we have a special guest from the wildly, insanely popular Black Girl Nerd. We count ourselves fortunate to get this woman on our show. That would be the one and only Davette See. Miss C, how are you?
I'm great. I'm flattered. That was a nice introduction. Yeah, I'm great this morning. Thanks for having me.
Well, tell us a little bit about yourself. I mean, again, I follow Jamie Broadnax on Twitter.
Our beloved editor-in-chief.
And she's CEO and all that good stuff, right?
She is everything. She's the founder. She's the brains. She's the inspiration. And yes, she's the editor-in-chief and CEO of Black Girl Nerds.
And she was smart enough to hire you. So tell us, please, give us a little bit of background on yourself.
Okay, well, let's see briefly. I'm originally from the Midwest. I'm from Oklahoma, originally born and raised in Muskogee. Yes, I'm an
Wow.
Okie from Muskogee. Got out of there as soon as I could after graduating, and
Okay. We love Oklahoma, though. We love from all.
totally
Okay.
Oklahoma, but I told just like earlier we were talking about the coasts, and from the time I was like 3, I was like, I want to live in New York, and I know there's a little girl in New York who really wants to live in Oklahoma. We got switched, so but that was me wanting to get out, and so I got my degree in theater and English with the intention of going to New York and being an actress. That got sidetracked, and I ended up eventually in New Mexico directing theater, and then I kind of fell into a lot of other things. That I got a law degree. I was a programmer for a few years. I eventually I met my husband in New Mexico and moved to the East Coast for a while to DC, and then to Los Angeles for 10 years, and pretty much stayed on the West Coast after that. And I also have an animation studio that I make little animated shorts, which are pretty clever. And then eventually I found Black Girl Nerds. I am a nerd. I've been a geek my whole life before it was cool. And I did a search on Google once and said, what? I wonder if there are other Black Girl Nerds, because I didn't know any. And I popped up with Jamie Broadnax's name and her site, and I was a fan instantly and followed her for a few years. And lucky for me, last year she was looking for correspondence on the West Coast, and I was like, I'm here. I'm so here for this.
Wow.
So since then I've covered different events and done some writing, and I also run the YouTube channel for Black Girl Nerds.
Oh, okay.
I'm the editor, and I'm also their recapper for Star Trek Discovery, which is why I'm here.
Nice. Now, you gave us a lot of information, but I have to be honest.
Yeah.
The only thing I took away from that is that you're an attorney, and that means I got 2 attorneys on my ship.
Well, oh, yes.
So I bet, man.
However, I have never practiced a day, and nor do I have any intention of practicing. I'm not licensed. I never give advice. I got the degree because my dad wanted me to be a lawyer, so I think that just kind of stuck in my head for a long time. But no, I don't practice.
As long as we don't run across any ambulances, I think we'll be okay.
Yeah,
Anyway.
Go get your bar card. All right, quit horsing around.
See, our other attorneys giving advice already.
We can't help it. It's in our blood.
All right, so now with that, Davette, welcome to the USS Internet. Now, the first thing we do when we embark on a mission is we set a course for correcting the courses that we set in the previous show. We call it course correction. That was a long way to get to that, I know. But on the last episode, Craig and I reviewed Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country. And what I'd like to do is go back and just redact, correct, restate some things that we may have gotten wrong. And I'd also like to get Big Sexy's, a paragraph statement on his views on Star Trek VI, because, he's part of our crew. But for Craig, I wanted to say, as we get into this segment, we did get a comment on YouTube where I posted the video, the podcast. The commenter's name is PJ's Channel, and he supports what you said about James Doohan, that James invented the Klingon language, but he invented it not for Star Trek VI, but for the motion picture. He invented it for that film. And then
I did not know that.
Yeah, I really didn't know that either. And then it was expanded, the language was expanded for Star Trek 3, 5, and 6. So you were right. You were right about that.
I did not know that.
Yeah, it's amazing that all of us Trekkers did not know that. And I've read Shatner's book, I've read Nimoy's book, Sulu's book. None of them mentioned that. I guess Doohan needs to write a book and get it out in the open.
If you remember the motion picture, the Klingons had a tiny little part and they had to say something, and I think that's where he only came up with a few words.
It's still amazing because, how do you come up with those words? They sound like a language,
They do.
Anyway. Second point, we were talking about whether or not Bones would be aware of the Klingon anatomy. You were saying it didn't make sense that Bones could not save Chancellor Gorkon because he didn't know Klingon anatomy. And I suggested that, well, maybe Bones didn't study Klingon anatomy because he, like Kirk, didn't trust the Klingons. He didn't want to know anything about them. And maybe there were other doctors on other starships and Starfleet that did know Klingon anatomy, just that Bones didn't. Well, that makes no sense as I think about it, because if there were doctors who did study Klingon anatomy in Starfleet, I'm sure they would have uploaded it to some sort of central database that's accessible by all people. And Bones being a doctor, I assume the Hippocratic Oath is still in effect in the 23rd century. Yes, he should have known about Klingon anatomy. So I concede that to you, sir.
All right,
Absolutely.
thank you.
However, had he known, it would have made for a very freaking short movie. So, and
Well, actually, it wouldn't
Yes.
because he just didn't have to come aboard the ship, right? They could have just said, Bone stays on the Enterprise. Well, simple.
yeah,
Anyway.
No, but I mean, just because he would have been aware of Klingon anatomy doesn't mean. What if there was an anomaly? Like, in our own anatomy, there are people who are born sometimes with their appendix on the wrong side, and there have been people who have been operated on. They didn't know what was going on until they got in and started moving around. It's like, what's going on? And oh, okay, the appendix is on the wrong side. So what if that were the case? Just throwing it out there because I'm a lawyer.
there you
Sure.
go. See, she's
Reasonable
practicing
doubt.
already.
It's a reasonable doubt.
Reasonable doubt. Now, the last one, Craig, I'm going to have to make you eat crow. You're going to have to eat crow. I checked the Star Trek Memory Alpha wiki page, and I checked the Bible of Star Trek, the Michael Okuda Encyclopedia. There's no mention that suggests that Tuvok was not a Vulcan when he served on the Excelsior with Captain Sulu.
Okay. Fair enough.
So we're putting that to rest. Okay. And thus endeth the course correction segment. Now,
Or the Fox News segment.
here we go.
Hey.
Don't invoke Fox News, please. Anyway, Big Sexy. Really quickly, briefly, counselor. This is your summation, right? Your thoughts on Star Trek 6, since you weren't able to join us last episode.
When I first saw it, I was excited that they had Michael Dorn in it, playing apparently a Worf ancestor, but that has never been followed up on. That's it.
That's that sums up all of you.
That's it.
Did you like the movie?
It was okay, but by the time they got to 6, I was kind of done with the original series cast. I really was.
Wow. Okay.
And they could have really used this opportunity to really build that bridge between original series and Next Generation further than they did with Generations, but they didn't pick up on that.
Yeah, Generations. I don't know. Generations sucked for me.
Yeah.
I even said on the last episode, I wish 6 would have been Kirk's last appearance, because 7 kind of undermined all of the grandeur that it was set forth in 6. But Davette, before we move on, what are your thoughts about Star Trek 6 briefly?
Honestly, I honestly couldn't tell you. It's like, to tell you the truth, I haven't thought about the movies in a long time.
Oh, wow.
So really, yeah, no. I mean, they kind of exist for me in a kind of outside Trek. I mean, except for, I think, the first one, which it was overlong and kind of goofy, but I have a special place in my heart for it. But honestly, I had to think really hard about what it was about. So,
Well, that begs the question. So, a lot of us, maybe I'm speaking for myself, a lot of us Trek fans, I think we tend to imprint on one particular facet of Trek because there's so many different iterations. Like for me, I love the original series, but for me, I was brought into Trek with Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. So I kind of imprinted on the movies.
Brilliant.
Right?
Yeah.
And TNG is what solidified my love of Star Trek. So that leads me to the first question. What made you a Star Trek fan? What was the thing that opened the door for you?
Well, it was twofold. I was because when I was little, back in the dark ages, when people only had one TV. My brothers, and there were only 3 networks and blah, blah. My brothers and I would switch back and forth on a particular night as to what we got to watch. They got to choose one week. I got to choose the other. And so they liked Star Trek. I was afraid of Star Trek because I saw the commercials and it had that mask that Clint Howard wore in the episode where he played the little guy on the ship, and I can't remember, but anyway, he had a giant ship, and but he had this horrible mask that he used to project to people to be afraid of him. And actually, he was just this little guy on a ship at the end. But anyway, I kept seeing that on the commercials, and the Horta, I think, also. And I was like, no, I can't watch monsters. And so one week, my mom said, it's their turn. I said, no, it's my turn. She said, no, it's their turn. So they watched Star Trek, and I sat on the couch with my face buried in her side. And then I started peeking out, and I saw 2 things. I saw Spock, and I saw Uhura. And I saw Spock, and it was like in love instantly. I don't know why. He just like, oh.
Spock is a Mac. What?
He was like, yeah, I was just, and Uhura looked like me. And I mean, it was interesting because Black Girl Nerds recently participated in a thing where there was a series online where they said, what was the first time you saw yourself? And on television or in the movies, and that was for me the first time I saw me. It wasn't, I was like, she's in space and she's black and she's beautiful, and I wanted to be her. So that brought me in, and and I fell in love with the original series. I mean, before videos and before all of that, I used to take an audio deck, cassette deck, and record the reruns when they started coming on.
Wow, I did the same thing with.
Yeah,
I was right there with you.
Yeah, and I knew there was a point in time where I could just quote every line of every episode of the series. I knew them before they were happening. I mean, I could just rattle it off, and I used to tell my brothers stories. I used to make up stories of my own, and frequently it would feature Star Trek. We would just make up stories. We were on the Enterprise, or the Enterprise versus Lost in Space, or something. It was like
Lost in Space.
Yeah, yes. I actually told a story once where, it was Star Trek Enterprise versus the crew of the family in Lost in Space for some reason. And I think I ended it up with, the teenage girl, the blonde, falling in love with Chekhov, and it was all good.
Well, listen, Big Sexy, don't get too mad at her, because when I was a kid, I'm going to say this for the first time, I chose Space 1999 over Star Trek.
Ooh.
Yeah.
And you call yourself a captain.
Yeah.
I was 6.
How
was I? 7?
You are an embarrassment, sir.
I remember for Christmas, the one Christmas, they gave me the Space 1999 space shuttle and everything, and God, Martin Landau was the man, but I looked at the opening of that show on YouTube. Oh my God, what was I thinking? Did they have crack back then? I don't think. But so yeah, I feel you on that. Now, Davette, I really, if Craig is willing to, because we did an episode about our debut pilot, if you will, was about what brought us into Star Trek, and I think Craig has the most awesome story, and I was hoping he would recount it for you. Craig, would you take the floor, please?
Sure, no problem. I'll do the briefer version of it, I think. So basically, I'm originally from South Africa, and during the apartheid years, I grew up in the apartheid years, the government essentially controlled all media. So, for example, there were no private radio stations. Mike and I actually doing a documentary about one pirate station that came along in South Africa. A very cool documentary. And So there were no private radio stations, just public ones, and they're run by the government. And so the news was controlled, so they could essentially retell the news or tell a fake version of what really happened. And then that's the news that you got. Newspapers were censored. There was no television. Television was illegal. So the South African government basically said television is evil. It literally said that in Parliament, television is evil. So we didn't have television. So while the rest of the world was watching TV from, say, the 1940s, we got television eventually in 1976, 77. So when Star Trek was around, which was 66 to 69, the original series, there was no television. So there was no way I could have been watching Star Trek. But later on, when I grew up a little bit, there was a church that had like a church fete, and they were playing episodes of Star Trek on film. Because if you think about it, they originally shot Star Trek on film anyway, because there was no videotape back then. So they shot it on film and then converted it over. I think they took those original films and distributed them to countries that didn't have television. And I was lucky enough to start watching Star Trek TV episodes, but on film. So that's actually how I got introduced to it. And when I saw this amazing story, I just fell in love with it. I couldn't get enough of it. And that's really how I got introduced to Star Trek, was on film.
That's so cool.
I just
Cool
find
story.
I just find it amazing that you had to leave your house and go someplace to watch a film projector. Watch it on
Amazing.
That is actually, well, it doesn't seem that weird to me, but it's just amazing that you could not actually watch television because of the government. I mean, that sounds like Russia, or USSR, I should say. But I guess it's pretty much the same kind of authoritarian type regime that would try and control the information, just like in, other countries currently. But yeah, I'm glad you got to see it eventually. And was there like a particular episode? I'm just curious. Like, what was the first, can you remember the first memory? Because that memory for me of mine was so crystal clear.
I really don't remember. I wish I could, but I don't remember the first episode at all.
I was trying to think, what's the first episode I remember? I just remember, I remember seeing an episode and thinking, wow, I've missed this. I mean, they were all brilliant to me. I'm thinking of Doomsday Machine, Wink
I love
Wink of an Eye. That was brilliant to me.
Yeah.
Amok Time.
Oh, yeah.
You know what?
Those are all classics and wonderful. I mean, it's like people can talk about old Trek if they want. They say, oh, it's just, the effects were cheesy and blah, blah, blah. It's like, it wasn't even about that. It was always about the storytelling. The storytelling, for the most part, was brilliant. I mean, it started to fall down towards the end when they wanted more action and less story, not through any fault of Roddenberry's, obviously, but the networks always get involved and things always start to slide. But, I mean, the stories were just really, really breathtaking. I mean, they stand up, I think, now. And I really wish they could have been shot from some of the original scripts that they ended up using in the, in the book versions, when they took the actual screenplays, because there was a lot more going on that they just wouldn't show on the networks, that were written by really good writers. So anyway.
And I think it's sort of one of the great things I find about television now. It's that the networks are basically losing control, which I love, because I don't like networks. They don't put shows on that I love, and they take shows off that I love. So, for example, I'm completely addicted to Stranger Things, and no network would have picked that show up. But Netflix said, this is an awesome story, please make it, and people love it. But I bet that if they'd gone to NBC, they would have said, yeah, this is too clever for people, which is typically what they say.
Right,
people are not going to understand this. I remember so many shows like Flash Forward and all these cool shows which were on, and they took them off because they thought people were too dumb to understand the concept. So I'm glad that the Netflix and the Amazons and these guys are just taking over TV, because we're going back to a time where people actually can make great stories and people can enjoy them.
Having 5 million viewers, that's something that you can sustain on cable as opposed to a network. So,
right.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's interestingly, if Star Trek, I mean, had never happened then, but it happened now. Even if they hadn't gotten the viewership that they wanted, they would probably have survived on someplace like Netflix or Sci-Fi Channel or something. Well, Sci-Fi Channel only exists because of Star Trek. I mean, I think everybody should really just acknowledge that Star Trek and fandom are responsible for Sci-Fi Channel and, you know, conventions and all the stuff that we kind of take for granted. All that kind of just came from Star Trek, really. The original series.
Yeah, Big Sexy, you're kind of quiet. Just refresh our memories briefly. What was it that introduced you into Star Trek, made you a Star Trek fan?
Well, when I watched it, I was a kid. It was on in syndication, you know, and it was big in the Bay Area because Bay Area TV had something called Creature Features, you know, a sci-fi show on late at night, and they really, you know, embraced Star Trek, and there was a Federation outpost up in Berkeley, and they just kept it going. And so once I started really paying attention to the show, things that really stood out to me were Tribbles, and the one episode where the actor who played Sarek was playing a Romulan. And he and Kirk had this like chess match of strategy, you know, where Kirk kept following him and Romulan kept getting away, and then they actually fired on each other. I don't know the name of it, but it's my favorite original series episode.
What was his, I was trying to remember. What's the actor's name? Mark Leonard.
Mark Leonard.
Leonard. Oh my God, I was so in love with him. This is so weird because I think my mother watched the show because I think she thought Spock was sexy. I think like an affinity for Vulcan males runs in my family because she just loved Spock's father. I mean, she could just watch. Let's see, why is it just stuff falling out of my head? The episode with Sarek and Amanda in the original series. She could watch that over and over and over. And even now, my mom is 90. And if I can I can make her smile by saying, "Hey, why don't we watch that episode of Star Trek you love so much?" You know, because it's just he's so sexy. And he was in another series after Star Trek ended. He was in it was kind of based on Seven Brides for Seven Brothers. It took place in a log camp. It was called Brides. I can't remember, but he played the bad guy on that. But he was so freaking sexy.
You brought back Seven Brides for Seven Brothers.
Well, it wasn't in Seven, but it was based on that show. Like Bobby Sherman.
She said it.
I guess.
Oh no!
I was like, I can't help it. It was like, I'm that old. So, but yeah, Mark Leonard.
Wow.
Well, was that episode called? Was it called Balance of Terror? Is that the one?
Yes.
No, not with the man. Which one?
The one where Leonard plays a Romulan?
Balance of Terror? That was, wasn't that the one with the evil spirally thing that set the Klingons and the Enterprise crew together, like certain people? It basically lived.
I remember what you're talking about, but no, this I'm on Wikipedia. It says
you're right.
Leonard played the first Romulan ever seen in the series in the episode Balance of Terror.
Yes, you're right. I'm sorry.
So,
well, that's good.
That reminds me. Like I said, this is going to be free flowing. Big Sexy, do you remember when we were talking about salaries for these actors, and we were thinking or positing that, well, yeah, you know, we know that Shatner and Nimoy, they probably both made a couple million for Star Trek 6, and everyone else probably made, you know, 900,000 or whatever, a million. And you were like, no way. And I was like, yeah, you're probably right. According to George Takei, he had to negotiate to get a modest 5 figures to star in Star Trek 6. That's insane to me.
Seriously?
5 figures.
That makes sense.
5. Okay, so
5 figures? Seriously?
What's modest? $50,000 to appear in a...
Okay, well, how long ago was Star Trek 6?
That was 94, I believe.
Okay.
Was it 94 or 91? Maybe 91.
Did they get residuals, though? I mean, did they get...
God, I hope so.
Action on the back end, I would hope.
Yeah, it was 1991, and he had been on a member of Star Trek for how long at that point? Since 1966, and he was only getting a modest 5 figures for Star Trek 6.
Wow,
that's
crazy.
Keep in mind, Q, Star Trek as a real media cultural phenomenon wasn't that thing at that point, man.
Are you serious? I think it was.
In 91?
Clearly it wasn't because the money wasn't flying.
No.
You had TNG. Wasn't TNG on air? Yeah, it was.
And it was on air, but really it was still finding its way because the first couple of seasons were, then they did the best of both worlds, and it's like, okay, we got an audience now.
Yeah.
But that ain't the original series, man.
But you said Star Trek, and I assume you mean the institution wasn't popping off then.
I mean the originals.
I don't know. Craig, what do you think?
I think the originals became an institution when they started doing syndication. That's when Star Trek really picked up.
Oh,
That's
yeah,
when the convention
absolutely.
started. So Star Trek was already a thing before the movies.
Right.
Definitely.
So it was a thing then.
And again, we all know that in this realm of, geekery, I can't believe I just said that we all inhabit until the pop regular culture gets it, it may be big to us, but not to the rest of the people. So when we see Star Trek 6, oh, wow. Everyone else is like, yeah, it's another movie.
I think that there's something to that, though, because I think it was a while before they started catching on to the idea that they could only do so much box office with the Star Trek movies, because they knew that there was a huge fandom, but I think they discounted still, maybe even with Star Trek 6, that there would be enough people who would come out to make it worth their, to really make some money on it. So they may have kept the salaries low because of that, thinking, and especially if Next Generation was on. It was like when did Next Generation come on?
I want to say 87, 88.
Right.
87, 88.
So with Next Generation gaining an audience, a lot of people were maybe not as tuned in to the old series anymore. So maybe that, with the last film, they were kind of like, we may not make on this one, because everybody's looking at, the new series going, that's kind of cool. That's really cool.
But remember,
I don't know how Hollywood thinks. They're just whatever.
remember though, Leonard Nimoy directed at that time the highest grossing Star Trek film. That's Star Trek 4. That made over $100 million, which is a juggernaut back then. So it was still popular. Now, one could make the argument that Star Trek 5 came along and that kind of, threw a monkey wrench into the proceedings, but I don't know. Now, the budget for Star Trek 6, I think we had said was it 25 million? Oh, no, it was 30 million. I believe it was 30 million, which is paltry by today's standards. But I don't know, Big Sexy. I think Star Trek was still going strong then.
Not strong to warrant the type of money that you were speculating that it would get.
No, I'll give you that. But I think Takei, he makes it clear it's pronounced Takei, rhymes with OK. So apologies if he's listening. He makes it clear that he only made 5 figures. That's a disgrace. And he's playing a captain. He's playing a captain. But then you had Uhura. You
got 6 or 7 of these cats, man, and they all want that same bump.
Was Kim Cattrall big? Was Sex and the City popping off? No, it wasn't, right?
No. Yeah, it was.
Sex and the City was.
I think it was on. I take that back. I don't know. I don't think it was.
I don't think it was. So she wasn't that big. So she wasn't getting that much of the pie. But then you had Koenig. You had who else? You had DeForest Kelly.
If you think about it, a lot, especially Kirk, hadn't really embraced Next Generation at that point.
How does that factor into salaries, though?
Because a lot of people, in production, I'm going to guess, until Kirk embraced it, a lot of people on the TNG side wouldn't really, go support the original series type stuff. Because Kirk had been a little mouthy about the show. It's like, Kirk's being a so we're not going to watch him.
Well, all right. So I want to transition into, I don't mean this derisively, but the flavor of the month. The flavor of the month for Star Trek, which is Discovery. And,
God, flavor of the month?
What no, what I mean by that, wait. What I mean by that, I mean that positively, is because everyone's talking about it. I was, we did the show last week. I wanted to get you on, Davette, earlier, but I decided to let's do the Star Trek 6 review because it seems like we're very Discovery heavy now. And that's what I mean. I mean it to say let's not forget that Star Trek is more than what we're seeing right now. That's what I mean. Please, mea culpas to the two attorneys to the two attorneys on the ship right now. But I want to, and I'm going to get this wrong, and we talked about this offline, Davette, and I don't remember. There was an article that appeared, and I don't remember the crux of the article. I read it, but I don't remember a lot of it. But the title stood out for me, which I'm probably going to get wrong. Talking about Discovery, the title read something like, "Why People Need to Shut Up and Let Black Women Speak," or something like that.
That was Jamie's. Jamie wrote that for the site. Let's see. I think the actual title was that the Discovery's premiere says why people need to shut up and listen to black women.
Well,
I think that was it. Yeah, something like that.
Could you enlighten us and refresh my memory? What that article speaks about, what it talks about.
It just talks about, I mean, it was really kind of interesting because, I mean, it was in the first episode, in the pilot, here's Michael Burnham. She's obviously, brilliant and ambitious. And
fine.
All of that stuff, yes, and that. And then, and she knows what she's talking about. I mean, she goes out, she does this thing, she sees it, she comes back, and she consults with her dad, because hey,
her dad. Wait a minute, her dad. Come on now.
Yeah, her dad. She consults with her dad, who knows the Klingon.
I call him Mr. Drummond. That's who I call him.
Oh God.
Anyway.
Now the world don't. Okay, go ahead.
Anyway, he, she knows what she's talking about. And now, obviously, in this case, we're not saying that, they didn't listen to Burnham because she was a black woman. It was a play. It's a play on the idea.
Sure, of course.
There it was. She knew she was talking about. They didn't trust her. And although everybody blames her for starting this war, it wasn't her fault.
No.
If they had listened to her,
it wasn't.
There wouldn't be no war.
Thank you.
So, yeah,
Thank you.
No, there just wouldn't have, because she knew she was talking about. She consulted. She got advice from an expert who happened to be her dad, and but the way the whole thing unfolded was just, it was awkward. They shouldn't have done it that way. They should have brought him into the conversation in a way that they would have said, "Oh, okay, so here's cooperation," like they did in Star Trek the movie when Other Kirk went crazy and was trying to explain his position. So anyway, so that's all. She was playing with that idea, but I mean, right now it's a great time for voices of black women, women of color, to get our opinions out, to get our work out, to get all of that. And so it's like, yeah, shut up, listen to us, everything will be fine.
So you're saying the title was more to draw us in. It was like to...
I think it was, yes, in fact. I mean, it was, but it was, she makes a good point. So.
Well, now, I'm going to raise shields against Big Sexy because he and I have gone back and forth about this.
Mm-hmm.
But let's bring this out, and this is open to the whole panel, okay? Now, you just said something that I've been raging about on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, that Burnham is not responsible for this war. She killed that guy out of self-defense. Yeah. And there are so many people out there who are saying, "Oh, she's not fit for command." I just did a video about this. She's not fit for command. She makes horrible decisions. She could have taken the shuttlecraft to the array. And I said, well, she didn't, because the shuttlecraft would have been spotted if there were any enemies lurking about. Mm-hmm. That's why she took a spacesuit. She puts a spacesuit puts off a smaller signature than a shuttlecraft. Now, having said all that, the mutiny shields up against Big Sexy. The mutiny. Am I crazy to think that is, although very, it was very, what's the word I'm looking for? It was outrageous. It was very bold to write that. it's not out of the realm of possibility. And let me explain why. And then I want to hear what Big Sexy has to say. I want to hear what anyone has to say. You're dealing with a female who...
Hold up.
Say, what's that? What's that?
I'm sorry, you're dealing with a female?
A female, yes. You're dealing with a female. Wait a minute, let me finish. You're dealing with a female who... Her parents were killed by the Klingons. She was raised in a Vulcan society. Oh, I see where you're going. Because I used the word female. I don't mean anything by that.
Just saying.
It's her gender.
Some of your best friends are females. Like, okay.
Yeah.
When I was younger, a lot of my best friends were anyway. And she was raised in a society that trained her to repress her natural DNA-driven emotions. So which I think, while it's an interesting setup for dramatic structure, because that is a form of abuse to me. So you put this woman on a starship and she encounters the race of aliens that killed her parents, and they hadn't encountered the Klingons for some time. They say that in the episode. Now, if you think about how some of our soldiers, God bless them, when they come home from traumatic experiences, sometimes they act out irrationally. Sometimes they even act out violently, unfortunately. So it is totally within the realm of legitimacy and possibility that she would react that way and subdue her captain because she's having a moment of PTSD where she was trained not to express emotion and she just explodes. But so please talk to me about that. Why is that so wrong that they wrote that?
All right, go ahead. I want to hear Big Sexy, and then because obviously there's a point of view that I'm not aware of. So go ahead, and then I'll make my point.
Well, Q, first of all, let's look at this, what we have here.
When he says first of all, you know I'm in trouble.
This Commander Burnham, or former Commander Burnham, was raised in the Klingon culture for many years, correct?
Vulcan.
I'm sorry. Vulcan culture for many years, correct? Correct.
Yes.
So then, as far as her DNA, suppressing emotions, all that, that's fine. Mm-hmm. But she's been a Vulcan for the formative years of her life. This is what she knows. Now, the shock of seeing a Klingon, and these people did, or this race of people did, doing her paternal or biological parents, the way the Vulcans are trained and taught, she would have definitely not snapped. I'm not buying that. Also, then there's her training as a Starfleet officer. She had assumed up to that point the rank of, was she a full commander at that point or lieutenant commander? Doesn't matter. She has command status. She's a full commander. So now she's just going to snap and then take over and make mutinous things. Are we supposed to be okay with that? No.
She snapped in front of, after being confronted with the people that killed her parents.
Okay, first of all,
I got one word for you: the Punisher, Marvel's Punisher. That guy snaps every time. Come on now.
Punisher was never a commander.
So does Batman, actually. So
right.
And they're both outlaws. And Burnham is also wrong here. Sorry.
I didn't say she wasn't wrong. I never said she wasn't wrong. Go ahead, Davette. I said she acted, writing her mutiny. It is legitimate and valid. I didn't say she was in the right, but it's something I could see a human being doing. Go ahead, Davette.
Okay. I think there's a couple of things here. There's one is that now I know, I'm sure there are like some biological reasons. I'm not really sure about that because I haven't studied it. But that the Klingons, oh my God.
We do that too.
We're all going back to the Klingons here. The Vulcans are predisposed to be less emotional, which from my understanding is not the case. One of the reasons why they chose logic to govern their race was because they almost killed themselves. I mean, they almost destroyed their own. So they chose that as it's a choice, not a
genetic structure.
Not a genetic, not a biological determinant.
Right. So,
that's correct. So it takes discipline, which starts when they are very young. It's not that they are non-emotional beings. It is that they chose to put aside emotion, and they pay for that. They pay for it in biological terms, and they've talked about that. So my thoughts are that Burnham is as much a Vulcan as any Vulcan child because she was brought up with those same disciplines. She was too young to have acquired anything other than that. Now, her only exposure to humanity and what is human is her mother, her adoptive mother. And then whatever else she reads, which is going to be a negative. Even her mother has a tendency to suppress her own emotional ways in order to fit in more in a society that she's chosen to live in. Now, she's probably going to advise Burnham, and I hope they get into that relationship more down the line. But maybe they can only be humans together. But Burnham's choosing this also for a lot of reasons. I think she's, very much in love with her father figure. So she's got daddy issues, whatever. But I think, saying that, I think it's possible that she, snapped in an emotional state. But I don't think that was what was driving the mutiny. Mutiny has happened on other Star Trek series with regular characters when they have seen something that is so beyond the pale, like a captain who's behaving irrationally, or the ship or the Federation. Burnham losing control, that's not really, I don't think that's the case. I think she made a conscious decision because we've seen other characters in other Star Trek series make the decision to take command away from the captain because of something's happened. The captain is acting irrationally. There are reasons why they have made that choice, and usually it is extreme. In Burnham's case, she encountered this Klingon. She acted in self-defense, which was fine. She did not mean to kill him. And she, in fact, tried to engage in a very peaceful way initially, but it did not work. And so when she came back and she saw, something clicked for her as to how the captain was going to respond in this instance, and that it was going to be catastrophic. And so she was trying to prevent a war. She was basically trying to make a point that the captain wasn't going to hear. And in order to keep her captain from dying, who is at this point a very personal connection for her, but also the crew and possibly Starfleet and the Federation. So I think that her actions were understandable, actually, in this case. Now, if they had listened, they might have averted the entire thing. Maybe not, because they were dealing with not just a Klingon, but a Klingon with a cause.
Right.
There's really no way of knowing how he would have responded if they had done what Burnham said. But based on all of the available evidence, her actions make sense from what we know about the Klingons. And so we know, she knew, the captain didn't know. And so she chose to try and avert a catastrophic situation. So I actually don't think that there's anything unusual. I mean, it's definitely unusual, but I think her actions made logical sense, not emotional sense, but logical sense.
Interesting. Yeah. But see, there are so many people online who are saying, I can't watch this show because of Michael Burnham, and they always inevitably point out what she did. And I find that insane.
Just really quickly, there are people who are against this show because of Michael Burnham before they ever saw a frame of the first pilot. So
here we go.
And it's absolutely true. There was a lot of people who just have a problem with the idea of Burnham as the physicality of her, I will say. If she were represented a different way, if she were a he, or she were just represented differently, I will say, diplomatically at this point, there would be no problem.
I said on the video that I put out there, I refuse to be that guy who always throws out certain cards, but it's some of the excuses that I'm hearing, you can't help but come to that conclusion with some people. Craig, what are your thoughts?
So my thoughts are that Michael Burnham definitely did not start the war. For me, it was very obvious that she did not. And Davette, your notion that she acted logically, I believe that's the way I think about it as well. An instance of this would be in, I think, Star Trek 6, where Spock pretends that there's a communication problem, right? So he's disobeying direct orders of the Federation. So she's within her rights to, we're within our rights to think that she could do that logically. She's thinking logically about the situation. So I'm good with the way it turned out. She definitely acted logically.
And for me, if nothing else, it makes for an interesting setup because she's definitely paying the price. I mean, Lorca has enlisted her, but Lorca's got issues of his own, which brings me to another interesting observation. These same people, and Davette, I'm speaking to a narrow band of people that you've kind of alluded to. We're not going to throw it out there, but we all know what we're talking about. These same people have no problem with the fact that Lorca has been revealed. It's been revealed that he was in a battle with a Klingon battle cruiser, I believe. He escaped and blew up his crew because he didn't want them to become prisoners. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but even in the 23rd century, the captain is supposed to go down with the ship. But Lorca didn't do that. He escaped and killed his crew. But he gets a pass, and everyone's throwing Michael under the bus. I like to call her Mike. Everyone's throwing Mike under the bus because she did something that she, either by your legitimate observation, was rational because she wanted to save the crew, or by my observation because she had a moment where those emotions flooded her and she acted out. So I don't understand why Michael gets all of this hate, but Lorca's like, okay, he blew up his crew. Okay,
right. But I mean, and also, I mean, there's like this convenient selective memory about other episodes, other series where crew members, high-ranking crew members, have just done something similar. I mean, just early. I mean, you're talking about when, Spock. That's when we first see Pike, right? He takes the ship to deliver Pike. It's like,
right,
you're not supposed to do that. That's the death penalty. But he does it anyway. He disobeys his captain, takes over the ship, endangers the crew, breaking all kinds of Starfleet and Federation regulations. And that's emotional. And it's Spock. So I think, I mean, there's other stuff at play, and we all know what it is. But I think also, I mean, there are some legitimate gripes about Discovery right now.
Sure,
I think we need to concentrate on. It's like, let's just treat this as another series. If we treat this like another Star Trek series, instead of concentrating on whether or not Burnham is Vulcan or whether she's adopted or what, it's like, who cares? These are just characters in a Star Trek series. We really need to concentrate on the show. Is the storytelling good? That's what makes a good Trek series. And I'm going to argue that this show has actually found its legs earlier than any other Trek series, maybe with the exception of DS9, which started out to be something really, really cool, then kind of floundered a little bit because nobody wanted really cool. They wanted Star Trek, and so then they brought on people to help make that happen and changed it into Next Generation Junior. But
that's another show, because I would have words with you about that one. But
I love that show. I mean, I actually loved it when it's the first episode, and I can't remember everything about it, but I just remember thinking, God, this is so dark and creepy and claustrophobic, and this is so not Trek, but it's very, very cool. And then they lost that grungy, edgy feel, and they lightened everything up.
You think so? Because I'm currently watching DS9, and I put it on hiatus to watch something else. But I think it's getting grungier as it goes, because there was an episode I watched recently, one of the last episodes I watched before I stopped watching it to watch something else, where Cisco basically says, he's talking to the camera saying, I did all this. We got to win a war. What?
Oh, well.
I forget the episode, but
what season?
I want to say, Big Sexy, help me out. I think it was.
I'm thinking that was in the 6 during the.
Okay. I want to say 6.
The war.
Oh well, it's definitely during the war. But he's He's in his quarters drinking some wine, talking about, I set that fool up. That's right.
He needed to bring the rivals into the war, so he did it.
That's what it was.
Well, you know what? And I think that's, that was an interesting whole series arc because it started out dark and then it lightened up and then it got darker again towards the end because they were in war.
Well, don't ruin it for me. Don't spoil it.
I'm not. I won't. So
I tell you what, they messed up by bringing Ezri Dax on. Oh
yeah.
Why?
Yeah. Oh,
you had badass Jadzia Dax, who was hitting it up with Worf. She knew how to use a batleth. She was, and now you got Ezri Dax, looks like an elf.
Yes.
Well, anyway.
Okay, all right. But I do want to make a point going back to Discovery that I'm reading, or as Big Sexy will probably point out, I'm listening to, because I downloaded the audiobook. Reading, listening, same thing. Anyway.
No, it isn't.
I'm reading Desperate Hours, which is the first Discovery tie-in novel.
Oh.
And there's a scene, I'm not going to spoil it, but there's a scene where Georgiou and Christopher Pike both disobey Starfleet direct orders. So people who are complaining about Michael, y'all need to check that book out.
Listen, Captain Kirk made a whole career of disobeying Starfleet regulations. I mean, that was his thing. So I think you kind of have to, I think there are people who want to say, well, this is how it should be, and without really looking at the way it was for, I don't know, sentimental reasons or whatever reasons. It's like they have tunnel vision with regards to certain things about the series. But I think the most interesting episodes are the ones where they kind of go off the rails a little bit. I mean, they kind of just say, you know what, we could follow the rules here, but we're going to stretch it a little bit. Right. And I think people forget is that Michael Burnham didn't steal a spacesuit and head out towards a Klingon vessel. Her commanding officer, the captain, said, "Yeah, that sounds good."
Well, to be fair, Michael did kind of cajole her into allowing. No, let me do it, Captain. Let me do it.
But she's the captain, and it was her decision.
It was her final. That's correct. Speaking of, certain people who might have certain agendas and don't like Discovery for certain reasons. What do you?
Anyway.
Okay. What do you think about not only maybe the R word? You just coughed it out there. What do you think about all the hate that's being directed towards Stamets and Culber? I mean, I follow Wilson Cruz
for God's sake
on Twitter, and this guy is like, he has to fight a war. These people are going in. Is it wrong?
What the hell? What is it?
I mean, what do you guys think? Is it wrong? Star Trek has been breaking molds since 1966 when Kirk kissed Uhura. We didn't actually see them kiss, but it's implied. When Jadzia kissed, I don't remember the character's name, on a DS9 episode. Why are people in 2017 having such a problem? I mean, I know why, but this is rhetorical. Why are people having such a problem with this relationship? If you're a Star Trek fan, this is something that you should expect, isn't it?
It confuses me.
Yeah, there's no reason for it. I think it's a vocal minority, that they just, there's a misconception, I think, that Star Trek fans are made up of white guys, like straight white guys. And, go to any convention or, and that's not true. But I think maybe some of them bought into that, and they think the show should be structured for them, and all of the I just want to say to them, it's like, look, you've had 50 years of Star Trek pretty much the way you wanted it. Can we have a little of it, just kind of with us a little bit, here and there? I mean, there's nothing controversial or weird about it. This is 2017, and that's 200 or 300 years in the future. Come on.
I saw on YouTube where someone said, they wrote this to Wilson Cruz. They said, up until now, my son and I could sit down and watch Star Trek. We will no longer be watching because of you and Anthony Rapp.
Pathetic.
I'm like,
yes.
What are you teaching? How can you say that out loud?
You know something funny? His son will be watching it whether he realizes it or not. And, it's like at some point, he's just going to tell his dad, I don't understand what's going on. What's up with you in this? My friend, my cousin, our uncle, or whatever, they're gay. What's an issue? But it's time. It's time Star Trek caught up with the rest of science fiction, for God's sake. I mean, it's like this really they need to catch up. And I don't know if you noticed in the last episode when they had the party people out there, which I love, by the way. I mean, there were like a couple of females making out, and they were like, it's like, it's great. It's great. If we can have like mixed Vulcan children, why can't we have, a gay couple?
Yeah, we do see another black Vulcan on this series.
Yes, that's very cool.
And the thing is that I think a lot of people are complaining. They say, "Well, this show has such an agenda." Well, that's true, and I wouldn't want it to be like forced on us. It's not. I wouldn't want it to be like, okay, look, this is the LGBTQ scene. Yay! It's not that. That would be annoying to me as well. But I don't think it's being played that way. It's just, look, this exists in 2017. Of course it's going to exist in 2300, whatever. Big Sexy, let me get your thoughts on that.
I think, I'm always using the example from The Wire. The Wire, the best show ever made, had, several gay characters and also showed several gay interactions. I don't recall there being any outrage.
That's amazing. Wow. No, I'm agreeing with you. I'm agreeing with you.
I think we're kind of getting back to core audiences. I think people who were watching The Wire were expecting edgy and I mean, we're expecting more drama, I think. I think a lot of times escapism is what you have a lot of these guys looking for their utopia, so to speak, in which this stuff that they don't like doesn't exist. Maybe that has something to do with it.
I think part of it also is, and I see a lot of this in comics as well, I don't think that, and this is just, my observation, I don't think the real thing is that so-and-so character is gay. I think that the producers making a big deal about him or her being gay is what's rubbing people. Because when Discovery first was announced, and we're gonna have 2 gay characters, who cares?
But they
just do it. Just do it. Don't talk about it. Just do it.
But see, I don't think that was. I don't even think that was them. I think it was what came out was. It's like someone discovered there are going to be gay characters on this, and then they make a big deal, and then the production company has to come back with, well, yeah, we're going to have gay characters, and it's about time. I mean, I think it's like they didn't announce. I mean, I didn't see any like big announcements saying, "Hey, guess what, guys, we're going to have a new Star Trek series. And we're going to have gay people in it." I think that it's just what you have is when they have to address something that. In this case, their built-in fandom or a portion of them has something to say about it. But I mean, I think that if it had been up to them, they wouldn't have made a big deal of it at all. And in fact, frankly, I didn't hear about that until I started reading negative comments about it. And that's when I was like, oh, they're going to have gay character? Well, cool. But I mean, I don't remember reading anything in a press release that said, and featuring our first same-sex couple, Star Trek Discovery.
Yeah, I found out. I think it was on Twitter. Someone had put out a release or photo of Wilson Cruz, and saying he's going to be. They wrote, "Here's your new doctor" with an exclamation point, as though praising the fact that we had a man of color, a Puerto Rican, on the show. I was like, oh, that's dope. Okay, nice.
Yeah.
And I didn't know there was nothing that said he was a gay character at that point. I learned that through someone saying it looks like Star Trek's going to have a gay character. And then there was complaints. So that's how, I don't think they put that out, the production team.
And I did know about it on The Wire. When I started watching The Wire, like, there's Omar. Oh, okay, Omar, do what you do. Nobody said anything about it. But I knew about, Star Trek Discovery introducing gay characters. I knew who they were going to be, but I knew it was coming. And same thing again, going back to the whole comic thing when they started talking about Young Avengers a few years ago. Oh, well, two of them are going to be gay. Who cares? And now with the relaunching of things, we're going to make Iceman gay, but he's not. People get away from the actual character. Just let the character do what he's going to do. If
Right.
that's how that character is, great. If that's not how they are, that's okay too. But that shouldn't be a talking point. That's why I think a lot of the discussion of a negative nature, unfortunately, comes from a lot of these people who are just too cement-headed to just say, shut up and watch and see if you like it or not. If you like the show. Don't freak out about what a character is doing in the bedroom. Who cares? Don't make it an issue.
Yeah, Gene Roddenberry's concept of Star Trek is all about this thing.
Yes.
So if you call yourself a Star Trek fan and you have a problem with black people or gay people, you should just stop watching Star Trek. And you shouldn't have been watching it in the 70s anyway. Because Kirk and Uhura kissed. We had people of color in the series as admirals and all kinds of things like that. So they didn't seem to have a problem then, or maybe they did, I don't know. But really, it's 2017, and people just need to get over themselves as far as I'm concerned. And it actually makes me quite sad that people don't want to get over themselves because of religion. Their religious beliefs take over their lives, and they believe that just because Jesus, who probably didn't exist anyway, said that, gay is wrong, that, ooh, I can't show my son this now. It's just absolutely pathetic. It just... It makes me sad for the human race, but I know it's a vocal minority, though. I mean, it has. We live here. We know that the majority of America and the majority of the world doesn't think that way, but they don't bother to say anything about it.
I gotta just point out, it's like there's been recently in the news, this photographer or videographer or something happened to catch two male lions getting it on in the wild. And he just thought, oh, this is so cool, and he took pictures. I mean, they were tasteful. And published them. And then, like, the minister of something in Kenya or whatever put out saying, well, this is outrageous. The only reason these lions are having sex is because they must have seen two male homosexual guests.
Oh,
No.
I am not lying.
Stop it. Stop it. Stop it.
No, I am not lying. He also said something to the effect that maybe one of them was actually female, ignoring the mane. He said he thinks that they should be captured and studied to find out why this aberration. And it's like, it's actually quite common that apparently
it is.
That male lions will mount each other and other male mammals and females, etc. It's like not uncommon, but I just thought, yes, of course, lions learn to be gay by watching male humans. Oh my God, how clever. And then I think the guy who posted it on Twitter, he says, okay, he says, apparently we learned just by observation. So,
but if you think about how ludicrous that is, right? I mean, yes, the lion saw two gay guests. Now, can you imagine how that happened, right? Now, seeing people in a Jeep is not going to make you do it because, there were two gay people you saw. So does that mean that the gay couple said, we're in the middle of the bush, it's hot, it's sandy, it's like dirty, let's have sex now because we want to show these lions that it's okay, damn it. Come on.
Watch us. This is what you need to do. You need some music, a little mood lighting, some wine.
and Mr. Lyons, now we don't taste good, so just watch.
Yeah.
Stay over there.
Anyway,
okay, Hugo, go ahead, do your thing. I'm bending over now.
Hugo.
Anyway, I just thought that was like, so, I mean, when we talk about like the mindset that gets upset because you have two gay characters on a science fiction series set in the future, you can pretty much go directly to that same mindset. I mean, it's out there, it's crazy, but unfortunately it's vocal and tends to get amplified in social media.
Religion.
Well,
that's the reason.
I have to agree with Craig about that. I think that plays a big part. Some people that I know and I consider friends, they're some of the smartest people I've ever met. But when you talk to them about religion and homosexuality, you think you can see them devolving in front of your eyes.
But I know gay ministers. So one of my best friends is a gay minister. So, and there was a woman who is in my hometown when we were growing up who was a minister. She wasn't openly gay, but she was gay, and it was, pretty obvious. And so, I mean, it's not always religion. I will say that religion has played a part, but I think it's more just a kind of, like you said, concrete way of thinking, a rigid point of view about the world that just, you can't hardly talk to them and try and get them to see reason. I tell you, though, the only thing that will change, I tell you, if that kid, the guy who said he wouldn't be watching it with his son, if his son starts to watch it and takes his dad and says, hey, I like this show. This isn't a big deal to me. That's where change comes. It's usually the kids.
No, that's where inheritances are lost and you're kicked out of the house.
Right.
But I'm going to quote Captain Kirk. You can always turn to Captain Kirk. I'm going to quote Captain Kirk with what the problem is. And he says it in Star Trek VI. He says that Chancellor Gorkon talked about the undiscovered country. People can be terrified of change. That's what it is. There it is right there. Kirk has the answer as always. But real quick, we're gonna start to wrap this up. I just want to have some fun now. We got really deep there. Wow. Maybe that was a bad choice of words. I'm sorry, Mr. Lion.
I almost said something.
Anyway, I want to talk some discovery theories since we have Davette here, who has some really great insights. Davette, I want to talk to you about some of these theories and get your opinions. And anyone, feel free to join in. Do you think that Lorca's ship is actually a Section 31 ship?
Yes.
You do?
Yes, I do. I think that's the only way they can get out of it. I mean, seriously, I think this drive, that we've heard nothing about, and the fact that that Section 31 people can seem to pop in and out of places pretty quickly and exist totally off the grid. Discovery itself is really a big, military secret. And I do believe that. I believe it's the original and possibly the only.
Well, here's the question I have in terms of that, kind of tertiarily related to that. So we know that the Shenzhou was involved with the Battle of the Binary Stars, which kicked off this Klingon War.
Mm-hmm.
We know that the Discovery, by which Stamets says this, we know that the Discovery was a science vessel, and that's why Stamets signed on, because he had this whole thing with the spores and whatnot, right? And he says to Lorca, I didn't sign on for a war vessel. He says something to that effect.
Mm-hmm.
And Lorca even hints, he says that this was a science vessel, it's now a war vessel. And we know it was 6 months from the time of the Battle of the Binary Stars to when Michael is brought onto the Discovery, and all this information about Discovery becoming a warship is revealed. So does that mean Discovery was retrofitted with the spore drive and the ability to have the saucer section spin and all this stuff within only 6 months? Because that doesn't really add up to me. It seems like that's too short of a time to convert a science vessel into a war vessel. Anyone got any thoughts on that?
Making it a Section 31 ship would be a valid explanation.
Right.
But I don't think that in the entire Trek lexicon, Section 31 has been mentioned outside of a few DS9 episodes, or am I wrong?
I didn't hear about it until DS9, but even beyond that, I'm trying to say, it seems like for this ship to have become a war vessel, they would have had to have been planning this way years before they even were thinking about it being getting into a war with the Klingons, which doesn't make sense because it was a science vessel, unless they're lying about that.
Well, I mean, it could have been equipped for war. I mean, not equipped for war, equipped with weapons. And it's only been designated a war vessel now that they are at war. And it's not, and they actually don't engage in normal conflicts like other Starfleet vessels. They actually just kind of pop in, save the day, and pop out. And their biggest weapon is the element of surprise. So I don't think it necessarily meant re-outfitting the ship, except maybe with some additional armory, I guess.
So you're saying
that would make sense.
You're saying the spore drive was being used on the ship in advance
Yes.
of it becoming a war vessel.
Well, they already talked about at the beginning, when we first see Stamets, talks about this technology that they've been working on for a long time, not just for war. That was reassigned to use it, but they were working on this drive as another type of drive. I think they just stepped up the speed when the war started because they realized it could be very valuable. Now, why they feel it's necessary to, I don't know, maybe they only want one ship because they want to keep it from falling into enemy hands by keeping the number of ships that are outfitted with the drive limited. But it seems like to me, once they figured out how to make it work, they would say, okay, everybody's got it. Everybody's got to have it. Or we're going to build more ships with it or something.
Well, that lends more credence to it being a Section 31 ship because it works just the one ship. It would make it more covert than everyone having this technology.
Right.
And the last conspiracy theory, and this one's really interesting. Craig and I talked about this. Tyler, what's his name? Ash Tyler?
Yes.
The guy that Lorca saved from the Klingon. You know this one, right?
Oh, yeah.
Is he really... Is he really Vok? Is he really the albino Klingon?
Yeah.
What do you think?
I think it's absolutely possible. Although this last episode kind of, if he is Vok, he's like really evil Vok now, which he could be. I mean, being changed into a human would maybe screw with your head a little more, and he was a little mentally unbalanced anyway, I think. But it makes so much sense.
And the thing that really works for me, that makes that work, it doesn't work and it does, but the objective evidence would say that that's the case because I forget who pointed this out to me. The actor who's playing Ash Tyler has been credited in every episode of Discovery, even before we saw him as Ash.
Yeah, and you can't find a bio on the guy who's supposedly playing Vulc. So it's like you look up that actor and it's like no bio, no filmography, and it's like no, they're not going to give a major role to somebody who doesn't have any background. So yeah, I think it's very possible. But this last episode makes it really, there's something complex about it because if he and Burnham have actually made a connection,
yes,
then that. Or, I mean, like I said, either that or he's really evil and he's just playing her to eventually deliver her into Klingon hands. But if, in fact, that's the case, why didn't he just join forces with Harry Mudd to take the ship and deliver it to the Klingons?
Well, I guess it's like, get in and become covert and you get more information as opposed to playing your hand too early. I don't know.
I don't know, but I mean, the drive itself is really valuable, as Harry pointed out. And again, he could have done exactly what Harry was planning, delivered the ship, the drive, and Burnham, and Stamets to the Klingons. And he could have killed Harry. Harry doesn't know, maybe, apparently. So he's playing really, if he is Vok, he is really, there's a lot more going on. I mean, a lot. And there's he's pretty devious.
There's a lot more going on while you got the camera lingering on Lorca's phaser when we found out that Cornwell was taken captive. These people are dirty, man. All these people are dirty.
Yeah, there's that, isn't it? I mean, and that's the I love it.
I love it.
I think it's great. I think the show becomes more Star Trek with each episode, but it's not your daddy's Trek. I mean, it's a wartime Trek, and we've never had that.
Well, the last thing I'll say is, we were talking about people having issues with Michael Burnham. I'll tell you what, I have more issues with in the 23rd century, we're still hearing Wyclef Jean. Okay?
Oh, please. You know what? That made me laugh out loud. I was actually starting to watch the series. I was in Starbucks, and it came on, and I was like, yes!
Oh,
and I
come on.
No, listen. She's going to a party, and it wasn't a cocktail party, and it wasn't, a tea party where we might hear Brahms or Beethoven or Bach, or we might hear Dizzy Gillespie or some jazz tune. No, it was a party. It was guys who were at war, and they were like, we're getting drunk, and we are getting, and to me, that just made so much sense. And it's what I have wanted to see. Yeah. I remember thinking this like 10 years ago, saying, why are we only hearing classical music and jazz in the 25th century or whatever, when, those aren't the only musical forms that might have survived. And variations on those anyway, at least in the original series, they had Mr. Spock playing his Vulcan harp and, Uhura jamming to that,
But I agree with you about that. I'm just saying, Wyclef Jean from the 90s, it makes more sense to hear some Lopty Neck or some Lub Lub, some Ewok Lub Lub than
what?
Lub. That's right. You know Lub Lub. Don't even front.
No, I'm going to front because I don't know what the hell that is.
You've never heard in Return of the Jedi Lub Lub Isak Lub Lub?
Oh yes,
of course.
You know we Siki.
Oh, okay.
That would have been crossover.
Come on, man, don't front on me.
Hey, I'm Star Wars fan around here, so I can't help you.
But then, wasn't that just, it was refreshing, wasn't it, though, to hear, like, kind of 20th century, 21st century, whatever, music. When did that come out? It was 2001, I think.
I thought it was 1999.
No. Was it?
I'm just saying, if Empire, if they can get Timbaland to produce new tracks for Empire, they could get somebody to produce a new track for the 23rd century. Come on.
That wasn't the only 20th century piece that played. The song that was Al Green.
That's right. Yeah. Come on.
And I was like, yes. Nah. People are still getting pregnant to Al Green. All right.
You should be playing some Luther then. Let's get real. Luther Vandross.
Hey, I wanted to say that I enjoyed last week's episode a lot. When it first started off, I thought to myself, oh no, this show has to do their time looping sequence. Every TV show has a time looping sequence almost. Sure.
Sure.
And it was done in a very different way, and it didn't work out the same way as the regular time looping other shows that worked out. So I loved it, but I did not love the previous episode. I just wanted to say that. I don't think that we needed to piss on the Vulcan guy, being completely illogical, saying things like you're half Vulcan or whatever. It's like, come on, people, man. Why do we have to, you know what I mean? I just wanted to say that I did not like the previous episode. It was unnecessary. We didn't need to know. We didn't need to poke into the Vulcan heritage like that and see these people who were actually not applying logic. It's just silly.
And the guy blowing himself up, that didn't seem logical to me.
Yeah. That was interesting. But I think that, and this is, I did not watch the Enterprise series after, I think, the first season and a half. And one of the reasons. Yeah, and one of the reasons was I was unhappy with the treatment of the Vulcan culture and what was going on there. But you make a really good point about illogical behavior on the part of the Vulcans in this case, Sarek in particular, or even the head of the expeditionary forces or whoever was making that decision. But it's not without precedent. Sarek married Amanda. And there was no logical reason for that. And Sarek had issues with his son's choice of going to Starfleet. That was an emotional response. And also, if you look closely at, how a lot of times the Vulcans are making their decisions, there's some emotion going on. There's some pride. There's some prejudice. And so I thought, I can tell you, I wasn't that crazy about this episode myself. There was a lot of unfortunateness going on in it. But it was an interesting way to get to Michael's history with her father and her daddy issues. But can I just say one thing about that episode really quickly? Uh-huh. I was pissed off with the whole Admiral Cornwall or whatever her name is, how they treated her in this episode. She's an admiral.
Which episode are you talking about?
Lethe.
Okay.
Is that what we're talking about? Lethe?
Yeah, I'm curious to know
Right, or
what pissed you off.
She's an admiral. She's a psychiatrist, and she couldn't see what was going on with him right away. And not only that, come on, get her a little drunk, get her in bed, so as a distraction, so that she won't continue to ask him about what's going on. That was insulting. And then the end point with her ending up captured, and he's just like, yeah, well, no, let's check with Starfleet on this and see how, I was just kind of starting to kind of like Lorca, and then that happened. I was like, wow, really?
I think he acted just like I think he behaved like his character has been behaving since we first met him. He is unethical, and he will do whatever he has to win.
He's definitely off the deep end, and I think in my recap I said he's going the way of Matt Decker. I think losing his crew becomes and avenging that is his all-encompassing motivation now.
I'm sorry, go ahead. I was just going to say, someone pointed out a plot hole in that episode, and I have to say, Craig, that's why I didn't really like this last episode, The Magic to Make the Sanest Man Go Mad. It could have been great, even though it was a ripoff of Cause and Effect, but too many plot holes. But in Lethe, they point out a plot hole that they have to use a spore drive to go to some remote part of the universe to find Sarek. Mm-hmm. And yet Admiral Cornwell is able to take a shuttle to the Discovery and find them and have that conversation with Lorca.
But they were already in that area at that point.
Who was?
They were already in the space, as I understand it, because they got Sarek. So they were actually in he was close to making the connection where he was going to be having this big meeting anyway, when he was lost. So when they were able to get to him to make that pickup, weren't they in the same area of space, basically, where he was going to have the meeting?
I thought that they had to go use the spore drive to go to a great distance to get to Sarek. Maybe I'm wrong. I'll table it. I'll table it. But
I have to go back and look at it.
Too many plot holes in this last one.
There were. You
know, why not? I mean, we've all laughed at Star Trek Security, but they were really
well, the whole idea was that he had been through this enough to be able to avoid it. He was doing that same thing that they did in Groundhog Day,
or Edge of Tomorrow, right?
Yeah, well, he had lived it long enough. He had been doing this long enough to know exactly when somebody was going to be coming out a doorway, or when, and how to deactivate this. It's like basically he's doing that thing where he has set this timer going over and over to account for every single moment he's on the ship.
Well, let me ask you this question. Why was it necessary for the ship to blow up to reset the time loop? Because it was that crystal thing on his wrist that reset the time loop. So why did he have to blow up the ship?
Why not just reset it every time?
That's one. And the second question is, the second plot hole is, how did he blow up the ship on the last loop? They realized, okay, we got to get Mudd to reset the loop one more time. So the plan is, Michael Burnham goes into the ready room where Mudd is, and she kills herself by eating one of those blue spheres, right?
Wonderful things, yes.
And so then Mudd says, oh, shoot, I have to reset the time loop so that she's alive again. And then the ship blows up. Well, how did the ship blow up that time? He didn't set a self-destruct. He didn't overrun the spore drive. So how did the ship blow up then? And again, to my original question, why did the ship need to blow up to reset the loop? It was the crystal thing.
I wonder if he... Wow, I have no idea. I think it was... That's weird. I need to go back and look at it and see. Although it didn't bother me. What did bother me was the fact that when you see this episode happening in... this similar episode happening in Next Generation, the reason why they're kind of clued into this is they all have this residual memory every time it resets. that wasn't the case here. So the only thing they're going by is Stamets, the only thing. And so because of that, I found it a little weird that, after every time he was able to gather enough information to be able to convince them absolutely that he was telling the truth. I know every time he learned a little bit more, but it just seemed without having at least everybody having some kind of an echo in their head of what was happening.
It'd be hard to convince everybody.
It would be hard to convince everybody in that amount of time. Yeah.
Yeah, that was why, and I did a video about this. We did a video about this because we do a weekly recap of the Discovery episodes as well. That's why the episode fell a little short for me. It's just too many holes that I could drive a bus through.
I think the only reason that it didn't to me was because I didn't think it was about that. This is the thing. I in my recap, I basically say, okay, so we have this story about Mudd, and he's going to take the ship, and he's going to sell it to Klingons, and blah, blah, blah. That's not what this episode is about. This episode is about Michael Burnham. And
yes,
this is
you're right,
really,
you're right.
That's the focus. The only focus is like her discovering her humanity. I think it's interesting that Tyler points out the thing that is weird about that. When she says, well, in my capacity as an officer on the last ship, I didn't have time to socialize. And I'm like, but you weren't always an officer on the old ship. You came in as, like everybody else. I mean, you had the opportunity to make friends. You had the opportunity to date or whatever, but she chose not to. And he calls her on her game in this one, saying, basically, no, you're choosing this. You're choosing to distance yourself.
Well, I summarized that whole episode. For me, there's one sentence, there's one line that to me kind of defines that episode. And it's the one thing I took away that I liked from the episode. It's when Stamets recounts to Michael what she told him for her to remember. And she told him, I've never been in love. And to me, okay, great.
Yeah.
I can take that from the episode and say, okay, it gave me that. That was a beautiful humanistic moment in that episode.
I think that's curious because I was thinking the same thing about the title of the song that they were dancing to, which is Love and Happiness. So that could easily be the title of the show too, the episode.
Okay. Well, panel, I think we have proven that we are Trek fans.
We had a lot of fun.
Yeah, so there you have it. Boy, that was a really, I love this word, trenchant, almost Euclidean. I don't know what that means. It just sounds, It sounds smart. A Euclidean study of Star Trek. But before we go, let's go around the room, and we're going to start with our guest of honor. Davette, where can we find you online? Where can the audience find you?
Okay. Well, you can read a lot of the articles I've written at blackgirlnerds.com. On Twitter, you can follow me at Mariava, which is M like Mike, ARIA, V like Victor, AH. That's me on Twitter. And let's see, YouTube. You can go to Black Girl Nerds and see interviews that we've all done. I do most of the editing again on that. And then also, I would love it if you guys would look up my Running Lady Studios on YouTube. It's my little animated short film. So I say little, I shouldn't. They're animated short films. They're pretty good. And I would very much love it if you'd follow and especially look at the one I did November last year.
Okay.
Yeah.
You just draw me in. I'm curious to see it now. So, all right, Big Sexy, where can we find you?
Q. Well, as usual, I can be found on Twitter under WSE Mark, Facebook under Mark Wiggins, and soon I'll be in New York attending the Grammys. That's how I roll.
Now, I live only a couple hours from New York. Do I have a ticket coming my way?
No.
Damn, okay.
That's what friends are for.
Yeah.
I've heard you sing. That pretty much killed it.
All righty then.
Yeah.
Craig J., where can we find you?
Well, as you know, you and I are working on a great documentary about a radio station that takes on apartheid in South Africa. So there's a Facebook group called the Capital Radio Documentary. Check that out. And on Twitter, it's at iBanyan. That's IBANYAN.
Awesome.
And I think that's it.
Cool. Now, you can find all of us on many different places, You can find us on YouTube if you search on The Red Shirts, a Star Trek podcast. You can find us on Facebook if you search on Red Shirts, a Star Trek podcast. Twitter, Red Shirts 1701. Tumblr, you can find us there if you search on Red Shirts. Wait for it, a Star Trek podcast. You can email us, redshirtspodcast@gmail.com. And you can find us on iTunes. Subscribe to our podcast. But also go to YouTube, see some video content that we've been putting up. I promise you'll love it. You can find us on all those different locations. But before we go, I just want to say one last time, please check out Black Girl Nerd. Please check out Davette See on all of her platforms that she laid out for you. Miss C, it was wonderful having you on the show. You know, the one regret that I have when I put together this crew, and I should be publicly shamed for this, is that I did not have, and I know I'm not supposed to use this word, I did not have a female member to provide that balance that we need. So I'm so happy that you agreed to come on this show with us.
Well, it's never too late to correct course.
Nice.
That's right. We can add her as a regular member of the crew if she's got time.
Well, I tell you what, we're gonna be calling you. We're gonna be. We put your red shirt in the mail. Okay. So.
Oh, yay! All right. Well, I'd be honored.
Thank you again for coming on the show, and thank you again for all of our devoted listeners. We will see you next time. Until then, peace.
Bye. Hold on. Can you hold for just a second?
Sure.
My cat is screaming. Hold on.
Okay.
We like cats on the show.
Can you not say female anymore? Is anyone pressed for time right now?
I'm good.
No, I'm good.
Okay.
No,
We're not gonna,
I'm good.
About another 20 minutes, maybe? Okay, so this is a pickup.
When Mike says 20 minutes, he means 40, but that's cool.
Yeah, well, I'm a producer-director. When I say one more take, that's 20. Y'all know that. So, Craig, Big Sec, do you think I should split this into two different episodes?
It's up to you.
Okay.
Yeah, it's your call.
You see how my crew supports me, Davette, right?
Yeah.
Whatever you want to do, Kat.
Well, they trust your guidance. They would never mutiny and try and tell you what to do.
But if we did, he'd be okay with it, apparently.
Red Shirts is not endorsed by Paramount Pictures, Viacom, or CBS. It is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. Star Trek, the Star Trek logo, and all names, pictures, and audio of Star Trek characters are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of their respective trademark and/or copyright holders.
All this be true if I didn't care.